Cheryl, how'd your NAV class go?
My what class?
Your NAV class.
Oh, NAV class. That's right. That was actually good. It was for 2 nights, and they did a lot of tides and currents of the Salish Sea. I learned a few things, and she helped me solve a very specific problem. So I was a case study.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the currents up there get a little crazy.
Yeah, we found, yes, I'm familiar with them, but we had a very strange situation where the currents were going the opposite way that we would have expected. And so she helped me solve it. The instructor was like a 6'10" captain or whatever you call it.
Great. Let's see. Tom is coming on. Aaron's here. Okay, I think we have a quorum. And a new member. So let's begin, and I'll give Tristan a chance to introduce himself in just a second. So good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled monthly meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission for April 20th, 2022. First item on our agenda is the roll call.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Stockness. We see you, Diane.
We see you.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Here.
Commissioner Hakinen.
Here.
And Commissioner Cole.
Here.
And I apologize. Normally I would have included something on the agenda, and we can do the election of a new chair and vice chair at the next meeting, but I prepared this packet a couple of weeks ago before Tristan was appointed. So welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for volunteering. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Next item on our agenda. Excuse me, did I hear something? Okay. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes from March 16th, 2022. Are there any questions, comments, corrections to the minutes? I see no hands. I had one question for clarification, and I'm trying to find it, and of course I can't. What did I do with it? Bear with me, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. On page 2, there is a motion that was approved and seconded, and the motion was that the next Planning Commission meeting, we would appoint Commissioner Hopkins to the Trails Committee. I didn't see that on the agenda, so is that something that we'll postpone until next month?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to do that next month as well. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. I just wasn't sure whether or not we were going to cover that tonight. Okay, again, any questions, comments, corrections to the minutes?
That'll include me also to the water advisory, that same agenda item next month? Or was that done last week or last month? I can't remember. Was that an actual agenda item?
I think, Aaron, your appointment was last month.
Yes.
Your official
Okay.
appointment. Yeah.
Okay.
You're good to go. We just have to rearrange you and Tom.
Got it.
Diane, did I see your hand? Yes.
So I wasn't at the meeting, but on page 2 of 10, under staff report, it said that Parker stated there was a request made at the last council meeting to switch from the lottery system for issuing new STRs when one becomes available under the cap to a first come, first served basis. So I know there's a waiting list. So what happened there, Trevor?
So following staff recommendation, the planning commission elected to keep the ordinance as originally recommended and not make any additional changes to it. And that went for first reading in front of the council last week. Wasn't maybe Cheryl, I wasn't at the meeting, so maybe Cheryl can, was that approved? Was the first
Yes.
reading of that approved?
Yes, it was.
So they're not going to go through one lottery trial? They're just gonna
They
go back
will.
to
So
the
we're gonna
first-
leave the lottery,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I wasn't here, to hear any of the comments. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, corrections? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved in second. All in favor, say aye to approve the minutes.
Aye.
Aye.
And Tristan, you'll have to abstain since you weren't here, but thank you very much for participating. Great. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. We have 2 items for public hearing, discussion, decision, and action. Are there any requested changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Move to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Here a second? I'll second. Moved in second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is items from the floor. This is an opportunity for anyone from the public to comment to the Planning Commission on any item other than items that are on our agenda this evening. Are there any public comments or anyone that would like to make a comment at this time? I see one hand up, Paula.
Hi, I missed the last meeting. I read the minutes and I sent you a little note. You may not have had a chance to read it, but I think it doesn't make any sense not to go with the first come, first serve process for the STRs. It's just not fair for somebody to be on a list for 5 years, accumulating requests for an STR and just have it a haphazard lottery. I don't see any sense in doing it that way. So I just wanted to express that opinion.
Thank you. No, I did not see your public comment. Did you send it to where?
I sent it today to
Commissioner
Um,
Johnson, I received it around 4:30 and I posted it on the website,
Okay,
but I didn't have time to email it to everybody.
thank you. We'll look at your comments, Paula. Thank you.
Okay, it's pretty much just what I said. It just doesn't make any sense that you'd keep it as a lottery. It just seems unfair to me.
And as we noted last month, when the STR ordinance comes up again for its periodic review, that'll be one of the things that will be looked at, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda are our items for discussion. The first item is the design review standards, discussion of new draft design review standards for development in Trinidad. I'll turn it over to Trevor for a staff report.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot new to report. For a little bit of background for Tristan, we're working on various pieces of the zoning ordinance that have to do with a grant that we got from Department of Housing and Community Development. So the idea, Trinidad's current design review standards are fairly subjective and quite broad. And so we're working on trying to make them a little bit more clear and objective. And so that's what several of these are, as well as the next item is also related to that in terms of trying to streamline some housing projects by making the exemptions more clear and more versatile under the Coastal Act, and then also allowing for administrative permits. So these items have been continued for several months. So if you go back to previous month's packets, you can get a little bit more background information on these. So for this meeting, I made some minor changes that we discussed at the last meeting. I think there's probably still too many of these design standards and guidelines, and we need to work on paring them down. Recall that I purposely included a lot more than I think were necessary to sort of give you a menu because it's easier to eliminate or combine. So I want to think about that. One possible way to try and make these more concise would be to have, for each topic, maybe one or two encourage type of standards and one or two prohibit or avoid type of standards. A lot of them already have those. So that might be one way to look at it. And then also included with this item are working definitions. So any comments and questions on those? On the next item, I specifically talk about vegetation related definitions. We might talk about that more for the next item. So I am just looking for additional comments, questions, feedback, in particular, looking at my notes and questions in the margins. We can go through each of those and or page by page. So this will be a continuing item for discussion. We won't get through it, finalize it tonight. So I'm just looking for input.
Okay, thank you. If it pleases the commission, I think the last time when we went through page by page was fairly effective. If there's no objections, perhaps we'll do that again. Everybody agree to that? Seems like okay. Okay, great, thank you. Tristan, I know this will probably be like drinking from a fire hose, but I appreciate any comments that you might have along with the rest of us. So we'll plow right through this, starting with page 1. This is draft design review criteria and procedures. Any questions or comments on the first page? Aaron?
Just a couple, Trevor, A, 2, and 4. I don't know if that's an opportunity to combine those two. They seem to be hinting at the same thing, development of private property, the harmony, community, and then just a general comment on your TP1 there, landscaping. That's definitely something that, as we get into vegetation ordinance down the road and that kind of stuff. But, I don't know, I feel like we need to be really careful how involved we are in dictating people's landscaping. I don't know. I just don't feel like that's necessarily our job within, certain criteria such as views and that kind of stuff and height and maintenance of it. But I don't know. That's just kind of it on that. But just want to make sure how we think about that. Is it publicly visible, or what if you're above it? What if you're below it? I don't know. That's just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this page? Diane?
So the first one, Trevor, is who is the zoning administrator?
Zoning administrator is usually defined as the community development director. Since Trinidad doesn't have a community development department, that would fall on me until such time as there is more than me.
Okay, well, going through this whole design element, you should be the one. I didn't know if, Eli or Gabe, was doing some, but it's, it's so detailed that it should be you. Okay, that was my question for page 1.
Any other comments on page 1? I have a comment. It's on your comment TP2. Trevor. And it might be a nit. You know, we spent a lot of time, and thanks very much for putting together the list of definitions. That really is very helpful. That kind of ties the whole thing together. But I'm wondering if maybe we should attempt to define minor projects. We talk a little bit about major things like major landscaping projects, but we don't say what a minor project might be. So maybe a little bit of guidance for that definition would be helpful.
I would say for that, it's, right now, that would be what we have listed for administrative permits. That's what I would consider minor. But if we want to have we could have a different set of exemptions for design review if we want.
Well, I'd even be happy just to say that it's encompasses administrative permits, so that would work. I just felt like there should be something that ties that together somehow. Okay, anything else on page 1? Moving to page 2. Anything on page 2? I don't see any hands.
I just had a general question for Trevor. How often are you, or do you foresee yourself doing administrative type permits? I mean, what kind of volume ratio to, in your years with the city?
Hard to say. I mean, it can vary. One year we might have 3 projects that come through Planning Commission. Another year we have 15. So it can vary quite a bit in one year. In general, Trinidad's volume isn't very high.
And that would be 3 or 15 that you would do kind of ministerially or administrative, or just in general?
That's what total comes to the Planning Commission now. And so, maybe a third of those. I could look back at the last couple years and see maybe what might be exempt. I think part of it is right now our exemptions aren't super clear. And, when someone comes, and they want to add a front porch or a second story deck or extend the roof overhang on their balcony, those are things that could technically require design review, and I try and fit them into an exemption if I feel they're pretty minor. So but then in the future, some of those might be administrative permits instead.
Okay. Thanks.
Other comments? Page 2. I'll just make 2 comments on your comments, Trevor. The first one is I agree with your assessment on a TP3. It seems to me that it would be very difficult. It would be cumbersome if we have a different set of criteria or different sets of findings for different permits. And so my personal opinion is that we can keep them as close together. That would be the most efficient way to run. The second item, TP4, I'm not exactly sure I understand how that would work. You say that we could potentially adopt as policy by resolution, but doesn't a policy require something other than a resolution?
No, not necessarily. So a lot of the design guidelines, especially the more complex ones that you get, the big booklets, those are adopted by resolution as opposed to by ordinance. And so makes them a little bit easier to modify, especially if they're not part of the certified LCP.
Yeah, okay.
So that would be one advantage of it. And the Coastal Commission doesn't have design review standards, so I think that would be a possibility of trying to keep it out of the LCP.
Thank you. Diane?
So does resolution mean that it's the people involved?
Yeah, it would still be adopted at a public hearing. And it's just, it would be a little bit easier to adapt and change over time if it's not certified in the LCP.
Okay, so it would be between neighbors? Is that it?
No, it would be adopted by the planning commission and or the city council.
Okay, but I mean, it would be about somebody's site or their structure, the resolution.
It wouldn't be specific to a project. It would be these guidelines. Instead of
Okay.
having them codified in the regulations, it would be more of a policy by regulation, by resolution.
Okay, thank you.
And that's something I can ask, the city attorney if he has an opinion on that as well.
That's a good point. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Moving to page 3. Anything on page 3?
Nice job with D1. That's perfect. What you captured there.
Anything else? I can't, I'll look real fast. Did we define historical revivalist architecture?
I don't think I added, did I add that to the definitions?
I don't think I saw it in there
No, I don't think you did either.
last week
Yeah,
or last
Okay.
month.
yeah. Can we add that, you think?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Page 4. Questions, comments on page 4? Let's see. I didn't see whose hand was up first. Tom, go ahead.
I thought the first one seemed kind of vague, E1. And it seems like number 2, E2 covers it. I was wondering if it was needed. I don't know. That's my input.
Okay. No, that's probably a good point. Yeah.
Is there general agreement that we can combine those two?
Yeah,
I
I think
agree.
yeah, really logical.
Mhm.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Paula, I see your hand up. There will be an opportunity for public comment when we get through this package, and then we'll come back to you, okay? We're not going to forget you.
I think her hand is still up from the public comments earlier.
Oh, okay. Diane? You're on mute? Diane, you're on mute.
So 2B, residential and commercial developments involving multiple dwelling or business units should utilize clusters of smaller structures with sufficient open space between them instead of a consolidated structure. So Trevor, does that mean a real tall building, consolidated structure?
Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with height so much as just utilizing multiple small structures instead of one big structure. So
Okay, because Arcata is going for big structures for their housing, for meeting their housing needs.
yes, and Trinidad is limited from doing that already by septic requirements in
Okay.
essence. But you could see, on the lot behind Murphy's, that could potentially be maybe an eightplex or something in one building. Probably it could accommodate that, or it could be 4 to 8 smaller structures. So this is encouraging the 4 to 8 smaller structures rather than 1 8-plex, for example.
Okay. And then I thought under views in F, number 2 was good. Yeah, I like the way you worded it. Yeah, I thought that was good. Thank you.
And that's from the existing views and vegetation
Ordinance.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just under F2A and D, I like the transition to neighbor versus complaining party. And maybe we're getting into the weeds. Is it worth trying to define a neighbor? I mean, what's the definition of neighbor? Adjacent? I don't know as that could become an issue down the road. You know, if Diane puts up 40-foot redwood trees tomorrow, am I a neighbor? Am I, you know what I mean?
Well, I had a similar comment too. What happens if we're dealing with a business? So is a business a neighbor? Like you said, it might be in the weeds, but we're just trying to figure out, you know, how to address the adjacent properties, I guess, is a way of looking at it.
And I guess, you know, that's that you could leave that open. We could make it neighboring property owners so that it's more, so that it's clearly includes commercial development. And then, you know, whether you want to leave that open to interpret during your design review. I think right now, neighbor is anybody whose view is affected, really. And then again, you look at the significance of the view obstruction. So if you're talking about a house on Underwood, but someone on Berry Road is saying their view will be impacted, it's not going to be a significant amount of view, you wouldn't think. So you could leave it open, or we could define it. You know, I think that's up to you. I'll put a note in there so you can think about that.
Fair enough. I had one other comment, and that is under 2A and D, I wonder if we might be able to combine those. They say somewhat of the same thing. A talks about to the extent when the property was purchased, and D talks about to the extent that the view is diminished over time. There might be a slight distinction between the two in my mind, but I think we could probably streamline that to make it one.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else on page 4? Diane?
But the obstruction and the view being blocked, one's about purchasing the property, you know, in 1978 or before. And then the other one is the value, use and enjoyment. I would not separate it.
Richard was talking about A and D. I think the main distinction there is that A is specific to other vegetation growth and D is specific to other development besides vegetation growth. So,
well, you know, the value is
but Richard's talking about not B as in boy, but D as in dog.
Oh, D, the extent to which the
sorry.
view has been diminished. Oh, okay. So combine D with what?
A.
A. I mean, I'm not hard over on it. If you want to leave it separate, that's fine.
I want to leave it because I handed out this article that came in the paper that I want to talk about next time because it's an issue in town, vegetation growth and property. So I would leave it until we get, you know, to the views and vegetation ordinances.
Okay, fair enough. Anything else on page 4? Moving on, page 5. Anything on page 5?
Few things. G2, yeah, I agree. That's invasive and unnecessary. Deciding where people put different things inside their home when they build on their property. Same issue for me with H2, windows and doors. That's a architectural design feature. I don't know if that's necessarily something. H4. Excuse me, H3, same thing, kind of placement and design of the windows. Is that really, I felt like H2 and H3 are kind of the same, two facets of the same coin, or two sides of the same coin, and neither one of us are our business. I'd suggest striking H2 and 3. And then H4, what are we worried about with that? Why do you think that's, I'm trying to understand what that is trying to prohibit. So why is it necessary, I guess?
I've seen some illustrative examples of, maybe, a regular looking house with a big weird columnar entrance, that is being discouraged. So I think that's what it's getting at. I'm not sure that it's necessary. For 3, maybe it can be simplified a little more. I think the idea is to avoid big blank walls. And so to include architectural features to kind of help break up the bulk of a structure so that they don't look as bulky. But I think that could be reworded so that it's a little more general. 4, this is a menu of options. So, right. I don't have strong feelings about it.
I thought we had another line somewhere about breaking up spaces, or is that in the later?
There is, I think it's more in the walls or bulk. I believe that is somewhere because we have it in the existing design review criteria. So it is somewhere.
There we go. I4, prohibiting massive.
I3 and 4, yeah.
So I don't know, is that replication then?
Yeah, maybe.
That was all I got on page 5. Thanks.
Anything else on page 5?
But 4 is about front entries, and I get what Trevor's saying about front entries. We don't want a hotel drive-through for somebody on a small street, and that's their front entry. So I don't know if it's the same as 4, I4. Okay.
Well,
it could be worded a little more general, though.
Okay.
I guess my thought on that is that maybe a lot of those things are already encompassed by the general architectural styles up on page 3. I think you could argue that someone who has a hotel entrance on their house is not really fitting with the natural surroundings of the immediate area and the other buildings in the neighborhood. And does it need to be explicitly called out, I guess?
No, I can, yes, I would like to look at combining some of these. So I will work on making those more general or combining them with ones that are already there.
I agreed with Aaron about H2 that it seems like H1 covers a lot just by saying what it says with the architectural features, and kind of what Tristan was saying too to me. So anyway, but yeah, 2, I don't think we need it. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. I just had a little nit on the paragraph, the top G on privacy. Again, I'm hung up a little bit on this neighboring houses. There could be a business So might suggest changing houses to like structures, so that associated infrastructure to respect the privacy of neighboring structures.
Absolutely, good catch.
Anything else on page 5? Okay, page 6. Anything on page 6?
J4, that's still not quite where I want it to be. The reflective roof treatments, I think we all kind of get that. We don't want something shiny reflecting, but the brightly colored, I would like to see that that's kind of defined a little bit more clearly. For example, I have a white roof on my shop and I'm going to do the same on my house because that's what's on it right now. Is that considered brightly colored? So I don't know, maybe some kind of language, primary colors such as yellows, oranges, red, greens, and other atypical colors within the community or something along those lines. Again, I just feel the passive heating and cooling by roof color choices that people have particularly when we're encouraging low pitched roofs. I don't think we want to take that away. That was my only thing on 6.
Any others? Yeah, my comment was about the low pitched roofs as well. That probably lends itself to maybe having a definition or at least some guidelines on it to say what constitutes a low pitch versus high pitch or something. Anything else on page 6?
I know a white roof or a light, maybe a color that fits into the surroundings. A light color is definitely going to absorb less heat.
Mm-hmm.
And that may help with our, making it more energy efficient.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess J2, the design buildings with roofs that reflect the predominant architectural styles of the immediate area. I guess, again, I maybe find that repetitive to the architectural styles, the overarching architectural styles section up on page 3. Maybe
Good
we
point.
can eliminate that.
Yeah, agree. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, page 7. What? No comments on page 7? Okay.
All right. Tristan, did you have something?
No.
P1, just a question. Retaining wall should be surfaced. So just like a stacked stone wall, one of those, is that considered a surfaced or treated to blend with their surroundings? I don't want to exclude they're really nice stacked stone ones. I don't think they should have to have something added to them.
That's a good point. That should be, no, I think we're talking about just, concrete, solid concrete. But I think, stackable stones would be totally fine. So that should be clarified.
Good comment. Anything else on page 7? Yes, Diane.
So the retaining walls, do they need a permit? Trevor?
It depends on their height.
Size?
So, and I think that's a building code issue, but it's also in our CDP exemptions. And I think it's 18 inches if they're actually retaining soil and
okay.
3 feet if they're freestanding.
Okay, so we need a permit if we want to put one above 2 feet or 18 inches.
If it's actually retaining soil, yes.
Okay. Then I have one more. The number and size of signs, this is LMN, I guess it's N, signs. The number and size of signs shall be limited. So we had a big truck issue this weekend, 75-foot truck, moving truck for my neighbor. had no idea that they couldn't make the corner of View and East. And of course, I was out there in the morning opening my gate. And so Deputy Diane took it upon herself to talk to them, saying, I'm sorry, there is no sign, but you're not going to make this corner. So I don't know, Trevor, what we're going to do in the rest of the Planning Commission, but we need to get some directional signs in the city. I did the same thing in May. 2 truckers came down from Canada and they tried to make the corner. And, they can't. And Murphy's lot is full now of stormwater equipment and supplies. So they can't always back in there, turn around or whatever. So we have the cluster of signs at the shopping center. And then we have walk, slow down signs all over town now, but we don't have signs for the truckers and the trailers. And that's an issue. So, the visitors and, the truckers need some kind of signage, and I'm just going to beat this up until we figure out where. And Eli's not on the meeting tonight, so I can't talk to him until tomorrow. Okay, I just wanted to make it an issue because it's in our design element, but it's a real town issue. Thank you.
So I could add except for necessary public safety and directional signage to that.
Okay, thank you.
And let's remind ourselves that as far as signs go, one of our future agenda items is the signage master plan. So we, at some point in the future, will be tackling a master plan for signs. So yeah, good comment, and we'll definitely be taking that up. Any other questions, comments on page 7? Moving on to page 8. Any comments or questions? I had one question, Trevor. It's Q4. I see you lined that out, and I don't have any problem with that per se. I just didn't see why it needed to be lined out. Well, just real quickly, what was your rationale for that?
Yeah, I didn't include a note about that. I think it's because I figured it was covered in Q1 in terms of maintaining hydrologic function.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I wasn't totally sure exactly what that meant. I mean, I could see, in landscaping, but, does that include a driveway to a street connection? It seemed a little odd. We do have the stormwater regulations that do require LID in the city when you're replacing pavement and hardscapes and impervious surfaces. So that is also in effect. So we do have some regulations that are already in place to regulate that. But if anybody feels strongly about that standard, we could leave it in there or clarify it.
I'm fine for taking it out. I just wanted to make sure I understood the rationale. Now I understand. Thank you. Any other comments on page 8? Diane.
So under landscaping, finished landscape plan should be compatible with and enhance the design of the building and the trees and vegetation remaining on the site and in the surrounding neighborhood after construction. Okay, so that's number 3 under R. So do we get landscape plans, Trevor, with our house plans?
We do not currently, but most municipalities do review landscape plans as part of their, permit process. So I would like to incorporate that in. And then there is the state water efficient landscape ordinance that we also have to implement. So that is, if an area of certain area of landscaping is being redone, it has to be water efficient. So the city should be reviewing landscaping, and we have not in the past.
Okay, so we should probably keep home in there in number 3 and not cross it out. Home building and the trees and vegetation remaining.
Well, the idea of that is this is design review for commercial structures as well.
Okay,
So we don't want to limit it to just homes.
Okay, and then in number 1, landscaping cannot be allowed to block views. The expected height and scale of the vegetation at maturity shall be considered. And is that C ordinance number whatever? Is that what we're going to do for that?
Well, we don't, right now we don't have any restrictions on what you can plant or the height that they can get to. And, it's going to vary depending on where someone is located as to, how trees might block views. It's also an issue for wind screening, privacy, solar access. There's a variety of issues with landscaping, both positive and negative. But so we don't currently have any restrictions on what you can plant. So this is the design review standard. And then we have the views and vegetation ordinance that doesn't allow vegetation to unreasonably block views, but doesn't put height or species restrictions on it.
So are we going to do that? Are we going to put height and species?
I would not recommend getting into those weeds, but
okay, because it's a huge issue.
That's absolutely something you can take on if you would like to.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about you deleted there R5. You saying it's regulatory requirements. Does that mean it's that requirement is better suited in somewhere else in the code, or is that something that we don't want to consider at all?
No, I think that would be basically a mandatory requirement as opposed to a design guideline. So we're going to have right now we have to implement the state's water efficient landscape ordinance, but the city is also going to be adopting its own in the next year. Yeah, by the end of 2023 under our LEAP grant, we have a task to do that. So we will be looking at a water efficient landscape ordinance that will be regulatory and binding.
Okay, and I guess that would also include not planting invasive species and things like that would fall into that.
It could, yes, and it should, yes.
Okay.
And we have some policies for that in our general plan. We don't currently have the regulations to implement that, but we will be working on those.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Page 8, okay. Page 9. Any comments on page 9?
I had, well, shoot, I just lost my page here. I did, under the last paragraph, sorry, still adjusting to electronic note taking. Under the review procedure, your red line item there, Trevor, where you took out within 100 feet and then changed it to that could be affected. I've said before, I'm in favor of more than less notification. So I was wondering if maybe a combination might be there. I know you said you generally do 150 feet. Something to the effect of, how about property owners within 150 feet and or those that are likely to be affected, whichever is more inclusive, or just something to kind of capture the intent that we want to be, conservative, I guess, and tell as many people as we can.
Yeah, I can combine that. This is the sort of voluntary portion, pre-project planning, so it's not the official notification, but yeah, we can encourage them to be as inclusive as possible.
I just think that'd be great, because that way, if there is a concern, it happens before their design is happening, that, help with their expense, having to redesign or something.
Diane?
So Aaron and Trevor, are you talking about the review procedure, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the applicant is to contact the property owners also, besides you, Trevor, giving the notices?
Yeah, so for pre-planning, when they're designing their project, the ordinance, and if someone gives me a call, I always encourage them to talk to their neighbors about their project so that they can hopefully minimize any impacts in their design before it gets to us.
Okay, so that's the design, but it's not vegetation. Yeah, okay, so what about remodeling or upgrading?
That would be included in this section. So anything that requires design review would be subject to this. And it's voluntary. We could make it mandatory if we wanted to.
Okay, so what about like, what are those boards? Hardy plank. My neighbor put on a ton of hardy plank, and I wasn't ever notified, and I'm 100 feet away.
Well, so siding is
And I
generally
didn't mind it, I like it, but at one point there were 7 trucks there.
So that kind of remodeling is generally exempt. I mean, some communities do discourage or even don't allow hardy plank siding. I think it's gotten much better looking over the years, and it hasn't seemed to have been an issue in Trinidad. But yeah, so some things just require, interior remodeling just requires a building permit. There might be construction trucks, but it's not something that comes to the planning commission. It's just a building permit.
Okay.
Well, wouldn't that also, Trevor, just fall under routine maintenance though, too? I mean, if your
Sure.
siding is failing on your house, you're allowed to maintain your home,
re-roofing, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that requires a permit, right?
Some of it requires a building permit, but not
Right.
design review.
Right. Okay.
Okay, anything else on page 9? Great, thank you. Maybe I'll just ask for public comment before we get into the definitions. So is there any public comment on the draft design review criteria and procedures that we just discussed? Okay, having or seeing none, we'll move on. So the definitions, I do see a hand. Okay, Paula?
I would just reaffirm Aaron's comment early in the discussion about, well, he didn't use the word intrusive. That's a word I would use about the government getting a little bit intrusive about not respecting personal property rights and boundaries. You get into some tacky situations. People have very different aesthetic designs. And, if a person is remodeling the house with whatever or choosing whatever color, and that goes for the landscaping also, as far as choosing what is appropriate landscaping for one is not appropriate for another. And then there's all the issue with landscaping of invasive plants, which I don't know if you got into that discussion at all. There may be some state regulations because invasive plants move from one property to the other when you're in a situation like in close quarters, like the city of Trinidad is. Nothing specific, it's just, it's hard to, some of the regulations I think you discussed were rather vague. I'm not going to say anything else about it. I'm glad I live in the sphere. I'm about 50 feet off of the corner of Trinidad city limits. And I'm glad I'm outside and have more space, that I don't have to deal with so many government regulations. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we do cover invasive species, just in a different place. So yeah, we do go into that. Good comments, thank you. Okay, moving on to definitions. Now, Trevor, is it my understanding that this is the first time we've seen the definition? Is that correct?
Oh, you had them at the last meeting. I just added, so I added a definition for the dry weather runoff, and I changed the figure for Florida area ratio. I gave you two. You didn't like the figure last time, so I gave you two new options for Florida area ratios.
Okay, I'm sorry, I guess I missed it from last month. Okay, we'll just plow through the definitions. Page 1 of the definitions, any comments on those?
I just had a question on internal arrangement of rooms. Is the intent behind that if you're moving walls, or what if you want to swap your living room with your kitchen, or what is that trying to grab and capture?
Which definition of that?
Alteration, sorry, the very first one, alteration. That's a fair question. Physical change in the internal arrangement. What was that? What do you
So
see?
yeah,
that?
I mean, that would be, swapping, so swapping a living room and a kitchen or dining room and den could certainly be alteration. So, but I don't think that that definition implies that any alteration is subject to design review, just certain alterations.
Cool. Okay.
But we should, make sure that that is consistent.
Anything else on page 1? Page 2. Going once, going twice, nothing on page 2. Page 3.
I just had
Go ahead.
the diameter of a tree and then DBH. Can those be combined? They seem a little redundant. And then under the dwelling, it seems like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 that are kind of the same thing. Are we looking to finally pick one? What are you wanting with that? And that's a couple times throughout this document, the definitions, there seem to be multiple choices.
There are. So sometimes when I think usually when that happened, I felt that the city's current definition, so the one that has the ordinance 166 after it, or whatever ordinance references after it, I felt that the city definition is not adequate. So I included, 1 or 2 other examples. There are going to be different kinds of dwellings. I think we did define dwelling in the STR ordinance. So there will be, I don't know if we need dwelling and dwelling unit, but there will be dwelling single family, dwelling, and probably dwelling multifamily. So we will have a few definitions of dwelling, but yes. So, and DBH, I didn't think, we don't need a licensed forester to determine DBH. It's usually just measured at 4.5 feet off the ground. So that's why I included that one. But I do like the term DBH because that's pretty commonly used.
For sure.
And then, so dwelling. So I don't have a so I think dwelling, single family. So what I have in here now for single family dwelling is the current definition. And then the second one I have in there is, so under our one of our LEAP grant tasks, which I started on, we have to update some of the housing definitions per state code. So this new one is per the state code. So that is going to be, that second one will be the definition, and that's per state code. I think dwelling unit, I think that could probably be combined. We could choose dwelling or dwelling unit, but I like the more current definition of dwelling, but we can call it dwelling unit if we'd rather.
Well, actually, Trevor, I thought there was a difference between a dwelling and a dwelling unit. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that a dwelling unit, as it says here, is freestanding building, whereas a dwelling means a single family dwelling, whereas a dwelling unit is one room or a suite of rooms in a building, which could be a dwelling, right?
Yes, you're right. And I think we purposely did the dwelling as it is for the STR ordinance because of how we use dwelling in the STR ordinance. And probably for the zoning ordinance, we want the dwelling unit. But I'm not sure we want, one of the things we might want to talk about is the number of kitchens, for example. So we now have we'll want to include a definition of kitchen. Someone can have an outdoor kitchen or a kitchenette, but not 2 kitchens because that makes 2 units. I don't have any specific suggestions other than, the second single family dwelling definition is what we'll need to go with. But in terms of dwelling and dwelling unit, let me think about that some more. And whether the dwelling is just going to be specific to the STR ordinance and how we want to define dwelling unit for the zoning ordinance.
Are all 4 of these referenced somewhere in this document that we've just gone through?
No, not necessarily. So I just started pulling definitions that are related and I know are going to come up in the zoning ordinance and that could be related to design and exemptions and permit requirements. But I did not specifically limit it to words that are in the current documents we're reviewing.
I don't know if that would make sense, what the other commissioners feel in the final document, just trying to think of this as to try and make this user friendly, to have definitions listed only that occur in the document. I'm sure there's advantages and disadvantages to that, but just a thought I wanted to put out there.
I think that's a good point if this list of definitions is only going to pertain to this document, which I guess is the intent. But I also, for consistency's sake, if the definition of dwelling per the STR ordinance, I feel like we should use the same definition of dwelling anywhere else that occurs throughout what the municipal code is and whatnot. I guess my question though is this list of definitions only pertaining to the design review and criteria?
No, this is going to be the definitions for the entire zoning code, of which the STR ordinance was an addition to, so it has its own set of definitions that were not already in the zoning code, but they should be incorporated into the zoning code. So I think we do need to look at that terminology and where and how it's used and make sure it's consistent. In terms of whether these only apply to words found in the current drafts. I mean, I could try and take out things that aren't in these current sections, but eventually we're going to be reviewing the whole zoning code and the whole list of definitions. So that's why I sort of started putting everything that was relevant in there. But I could, for this exercise, take out things that aren't applicable.
Or shade it or something, I don't know.
Diane?
So I feel all the definitions need to stay, especially the first one, you know, with the STR ordinance, and the other ones, the single dwelling, I mean, single family has, one is the LEAP grant, the other one is an ordinance. And then the last one, the dwelling unit, I mean, what about the ADUs? You know, they're going to be, you know, I can see them in the last one kind of. So I wouldn't take any of them out. I think the better defined and listed is going to be good for people, because, you know, we've got to provide more housing. So if we get these individual definitions, they're clear. You know, I know single family is repeated, but they're different. Mobile home and, you know, I don't know. I would leave them all.
You do bring up a good point about the ADU ordinance, because I think that also had its own set of definitions that I think would be good to maybe carry over into this, because that applies to housing and how it's defined as well.
So my comment would be that early on in the work for the general plan, we put together a glossary. Are we saying that these definitions are part of the glossary?
No, so the general plan glossary is currently separate from the zoning ordinance glossary. I think for the general plan, it's a little bit more illustrative and informative. For the zoning ordinance, definitions are very legally important.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of regulation. So they are a little bit different, but so a different set of definitions and a different set of purposes, but they should be consistent. And so you do see some definitions in here from our general plan glossary as well.
I see that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I was just trying to make that distinction, and yeah, you've clarified that. Thank you.
So right now, this is just, again, it's sort of a mishmash of definitions that might come up in these ordinance sections that we're talking about, but it's certainly not complete, and it's not, you know, it's still kind of a menu that we're working on. That's why I called it working definitions, because I haven't flushed it out. I just more kind of started throwing stuff in there.
Understand. Anything on that? Anything else on yes, Diane?
I just want to thank Trevor for doing those definitions because it really makes us understand as planning commissioners what we have to look at. And also what Gabe, Anton, Eli, the building commissioner, the building official, they all need to know these definitions too. So I think separating them, for the general plan and the zoning is really good. Trevor, you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on this page? Page 3, page 4. I guess I had one comment, and that is of all the definitions which I thought we should include the definition of exclusion and exception. I get confused between the two of them, and an exclusion is usually what you keep out, and an exception means that the rules don't apply. So I always have to go back and remind myself which one is which. So perhaps we could add the definitions of those two things, since
There's three. We have exemptions, exclusions, and exceptions.
Yes.
And those are just for CDP permit requirements. That doesn't even include CEQA, which has its own exemptions and exceptions. But we don't need to get into that here.
Okay, I think you understand my point. All right. Any other comments on page 4? Okay, page 5.
Trevor, can you help me again with the 1.0 Florida area and the 0.5? I thought I had this at the last meeting and had a really good grasp on this, and I saw these cool new pictures and thought right on, and I feel like I'm a little lost again with what these are trying to display.
So yeah, so the 100% or 1 Florida area ratio, those are 3 different ways you can accomplish a 100% Florida area ratio with different lot coverages. So the taller your building is, the more Florida area lot area ratio it's going to have, but not necessarily, but maybe less lot coverage. That can vary. So it's I think it's trying to illustrate the difference between Florida area ratio and lot coverage, really, and the relationship between them. So, if you have, so what we look at, for example, our minimum lot size in the UR zone is 8,000 square feet with a guideline for a maximum floor area of 2,000 square feet. And so that equates to a 25% floor to area ratio. Now that can, if it's a 1-story building, that 25% is going to be a quarter of the lot. If it's a 2-story building, that 25% is going to be 1/8 of the lot.
Have you found any illustrations that would give a more specific example of one of our requirements in Trinidad?
No, I haven't. No, these are.
I guess that's more what I was trying to, we don't have 100% lot coverage, obviously. I was looking for something that was more.
A lot of them actually are more, because a lot of cities you can have, a 5 floor area ratio, for example, and we didn't know. So I these were the ones that I could find that were smallest. I'm not a graphic designer, but I can try and come up with maybe Tom does design stuff. Maybe he can work on something. Do you think
however I can help.
You can make some better figures here? Maybe I could work with you on that.
Yeah, I need to understand them a little better myself.
Okay.
But yeah, no problem.
I think from my perspective, what would really be useful is an example using our general convention of 25%. And because we're never going to see a Florida area ratio of 1.
Right.
And so it makes sense to, in my mind, let's be practical and say for Trinidad, as I said, our precedence, or what you want to call it, is 25%. This is how you calculate it. This is what it could look like. And that way, I think it would be a little bit easier, at least for me, to understand. And Tom, if you can add some professional critiquing and twist to this, that would be great.
I assure you, I'm going to try to simplify it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Anything else on that page? Page 5. Okay, moving on to page 6.
I had one under household pets, as determined by the director. What should that read? Or what do we need that to read?
Probably zoning administrator.
Yeah, that was a carryover, I think, before we switched over. Yeah. Anything else on that page? Page 7. Okay, nothing on page 7. Page 8. Just a very small nit under, let's see, it's the third paragraph that starts, also includes indoor storage of automobiles. That last phrase there, telecommunications facilities. I think that's just a artifact of pulling that from Fort Bragg. Is that correct? I don't think that, we don't have a telecommunications facilities section in here.
We do not. And the Trinidad Head site is currently being decommissioned, so maybe we don't need that definition, which is why I highlighted it.
Okay.
But it's not to say that there would never be something else proposed.
Well, I guess my point is, when we say see telecommunications facilities, that implies that we go to some document that's called telecommunication facilities. We don't have that, right?
I think that would just be, I think that just refers to another definition. But I didn't put the definition in here.
That's yeah, that was a disconnect for me. I couldn't find that. Yeah. Okay. Understand. Anything else on this page? Page 9. Anything on page 9? Okay. And page 10. Okay, very good. So that is the end of the definitions. Yes, I'll resonate with what Diane said. Thanks, Trevor. These are great definitions. I'm glad we have them now. It helps understand some of this. Diane, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had one comment on page 7. So I did go to major vegetation removal. So do we need to add an F that says PG&E or utility lines?
Could you clarify what you mean there?
Well, I mean, we're talking about vegetation removal of trees and woody vegetation, and sometimes they're right next to the utility lines or poles, or they could be next to a neighbor's fence or house. I mean, I just put down an F and a G. So
But why would, so, but this is defining major versus not major, so how would it be different if it's next to a PG&E pole or a fence?
Well, I wasn't sure,
Well, maybe, so in my under the next item, I have some specific information about major vegetation removal, and I included some exemptions that from Humboldt County, and maybe those are things that might be exemptions. So maybe we discuss it more.
yeah, and I think I have some comments about CAL FIRE and maybe it was the next one, but I just wanted to know that the utility lines and fences of the neighbors are issues in major vegetation removal. Okay, thanks.
Okay, this is the end of the draft definition update. I think I'll again open it up for public comment. If there's any public comment on the definition section of what we just discussed. Okay, hearing none, we can move on then to the next agenda item, which is project streamlining.
Can we have a break?
Sure.
Can we have like a 5-minute break, please?
Of course. Good idea. Okay, so by my clock at 7:21, 5 minutes, 7:26. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're all back but Diane, all right. Were you on some exotic vacation, Trevor?
No, just Hawaii this time.
Oh, just Hawaii, okay.
Seems I missed winter time though. All of a sudden we had winter while I was gone.
Thank goodness. Yeah,
Yeah.
although I've been dealing with nothing but widowmakers in these storms.
Oh.
My driveway has been blocked 3 times this winter.
Just recently?
Yeah, like 2 days ago.
Wow.
I have a pretty large redwood that unfortunately we lost about half of the crown a year ago. And it's just every little bit of windstorm just beats the rest of it up. So been coming down in little chunks. Well, I shouldn't say little either.
Does that have other trees been cut in your neighborhood and it's getting more exposed?
This is the same configuration as it's been for 30 years.
Wow.
But like I said, there was a real bad windstorm a year ago and we lost about half the crown. And so that has exposed the rest of the crown to severe damage. So it keeps coming down. And they haul it away. Diane, where are you? Well, she'll probably be back pretty soon. Let's at least get started through an introduction of this next agenda item. Trevor, can you give us a brief summary of where we're at with this one?
Sure. So we didn't spend a lot of time on this one at the last meeting. I didn't get a lot of feedback, so not a lot of changes. Just as a quick reminder, the exemptions are basically straight from the Coastal Act regulations. So for the most part, those are what they are. We've tweaked them and added to them a little bit. The exclusions are specific for Trinidad. All of our exemptions are currently exclusions. And so the exclusions would require a new exclusion order from the Coastal Commission. And then there are exceptions for both the exemptions and exclusions. And then there are administrative permits. So the administrative permit process would be an abbreviated process for certain smaller, more minor projects. So those are included in 2 separate documents because they'd be in 2, different places in the ordinance. So some of this gets, we're working on small sections of the ordinance. Some of these sections are going to rely on other sections of the ordinance. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to work on them in a vacuum. But we also can't look at the entire ordinance all at once. So, again, this will be a work in progress. I think it's something that we'll get to a point that we're pretty happy with, but then, we'll need to continue to revisit it as we update other sections of the ordinance. One of the things I thought specifically we could work on as part of this, because there are think it's an exclusion for major vegetation removal. So I suggested we look more closely at the definition of major vegetation removal. So I included the definition from the existing general plan, land use plan, glossary. So I'm just, for Tristan's benefit, I use land use plan and general plan interchangeably in Trinidad because Trinidad's entirely in the coastal zone. So all cities in the state are required to have a general plan, and those require certain elements. A good place to start would be the introduction of the draft general plan that's available on the city's website, and we should get you a copy of all the entire current draft. Gives a good overview. And then in coastal cities, they also have to have a coastal land use plan, which is basically a general plan that covers coastal issues. Because Trinidad is entirely in the coastal zone, like I said, I use them interchangeably, but there will probably be sections of our general plan that are not going to be certified by the Coastal Commission as part of the land use plan. So that's, so just a little bit on terminology there. So our current land use plan has this definition of major vegetation removal in the glossary. Some other things I saw had to do with including trees that had multiple trunks or stems, if you want to think about that. And then also I found these exemptions. They're from Humboldt County, and they're part of Humboldt County's local coastal program. So they are certified for use in the coastal zone. So those are exemptions from what requires a special permit for major vegetation removal. I suggested adding something for hazard trees as well, but you know, our current ordinance just says hazard trees subject to approval of the city engineer, and that's not adequate. So we need, you know, we need a professional to determine that something's a hazard. You know, maybe there's also exemptions for the fuel reduction, defensible space might be another exemption. As Diane was talking about, maybe PG&E might be another exemption, although PG&E tends to go, a lot of their lines do go through sensitive habitat. So I think the Coastal Commission and PG&E are actually currently fighting over who has jurisdiction over what. So I think we could look at that a little bit more. And then also just the general definition of vegetation removal, because we don't have a definition of removal in our zoning ordinance, but there is a definition of removal in the views and vegetation ordinance that says complete elimination, including roots, stems, trunks, and leaves, which wouldn't include just cutting down a tree like we discussed last year, even though that's pretty clearly removal. So I included some sample definitions of removal. And so I thought that was something we could work on narrowing down as part of this. There was and then designation of scenic areas was another issue that's come up in regards to this. So under the exemptions, there's an exception for projects that are in highly scenic areas. There's some interest in having the city being able to designate areas as scenic, and our current general plan does talk about a variety like view corridors, scenic areas, scenic vistas, come up in various locations, none of which are defined. But designating something as scenic does have implications under the Coastal Act. So I just wanted you to be aware of those in terms of anything that any area that's designated as scenic would then be appealable to the Coastal Commission if it's not already. it would be considered a sensitive coastal resource area, so it would have additional protection. So just wanted you to be aware of those implications and just keep that in mind while we're discussing these. Otherwise, you've got the exemptions, and then you've got the exclusions, and then you've got the administrative coastal development permit procedures. I expanded on the matrix for development that would fall under exemptions, exclusions, and administrative CDPs. So I added pretty much everything, not just residential projects. So hopefully that helps keeps things in order. And then the flow chart for administrative permits. So at this point, I'm just looking for feedback. I know we've been going over regulations for a while, but any feedback you've got, if you want to pay particular attention to, again, my notes and questions in the margins. That's it.
Thank you. So right up front, you've asked for some comments on definition of major vegetation removal as an example. Do we want to, what's the pleasure of the commission? Do you want to take a look at some of these specific topics and work them, or do you want to work through the document of the exemptions and administrative CDPs? No comment? Okay. Well, let's just tackle then for Trevor. Let's see if we can come up with what we believe is what we would want for major vegetation removal. My feeling is I like what's in the current LUP. I think your other comments that you made regarding multiple trunks probably make some sense as well. So I would certainly think that would make sense. I didn't quite understand that. Well, the exemptions from Humboldt County, I think I understand fairly well. And I assume that when we look at page 2, the 4 dots, bullets, I should say, at the top of the page all relate to exemptions from Humboldt County. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct. So Humboldt County requires what they call a special permit, which is a type of CDP for major vegetation removal. But these are the exemptions, and these are certified by the Coastal Commission, except that last one in parentheses.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. The imminent danger, imminent hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. So I'm happy with the current definition, and then I would suggest adding the multi-trunk type of options as well. Any comments? Dan? Sorry, Tristan, I didn't see you. I'll get to you.
I keep losing my screen. Okay, under the bullets, the last bullet, Trevor, I would also like to add something similar to the following: trees and vegetation posing an imminent danger to people's structure or infrastructure as determined by a certified arborist, licensed professional forester. Maybe you need to add CAL FIRE to that too, because here's my notice that I got from CAL FIRE. It's not for Trinidad, but it's for Willow Creek, for the cabins. So, they're on it, and with the state. So I think we should add that in. We might even want to add, somebody else besides CAL FIRE, but I don't really know right? No, but I just know that, we're just a moderate fire area, and maybe, Aaron, you can jump in on some of that too. Okay, thank you.
Tristan, you had your hand up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, you'll have to forgive me. I don't have a great handle on the difference between an exemption, exception, and exclusion, but an exemption as given on that list that you pulled from the county, Trevor, that means like, if you were to hit one of those bullet points, there would be no interaction with the city, and you would just move forward under whatever permit that you have.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. I guess in that regard, I definitely support adding all those exemptions into wherever that should go, I guess. And then my other question is, so all the specs that are given for the definition of major vegetation removal per the current land use plan, are those like pulled directly from, I think you might have said this, are they pulled directly from the Coastal Act, or is that more of is that sort of locally derived?
That's a good question. No, there is no definition of major vegetation removal in the Coastal Act. The 12 inches DBH is almost universal. Sometimes it's a little bit more. And then I know the Coastal Commission also looks at area of disturbance, and 500 square feet of like shrubbery. They also consider major vegetation removal, but it's not defined. I don't have a note in the LUP where I took this from, but I took it from somebody else. So this was someone's definition, and we don't have to include all of it. I'm guessing that there might be, the Coastal Commission may not allow some of these exceptions if they're within a NESHA, so an environmentally sensitive habitat area. So that, that would be a question for the Coastal Commission is whether those exemptions apply in a NESHA. But yeah, so they're certainly open for discussion. We could look at other examples as well.
Okay. I guess my concern with that, some of those definitions, I guess, or the specs of that definition is, I guess it seems like, specifically the 500 square feet of vegetation removal. I guess looking around my neighborhood, like many of my neighbors have more than 500 square feet of just like cotoneaster and Himalayan blackberry and weedy heath and whatnot. And like, I feel like they should be able to go ahead and whack all that without any sort of review by anybody, I guess. It's just there's empty lots full of brush or shrubs, I guess, invasive shrubs. And so I guess I'm hesitant to I don't know if we need to up the square footage, or if we want to put a caveat with it that pertains to native vegetation or something like that. I guess I have some concerns with that. Or I guess the other alternative to that is maybe changing the way we're approaching major vegetation removal in regard to a coastal development permit. I guess I wouldn't want to discourage my neighbors from clearing all their cotoneaster because they have to go through some sort of exhaustive coastal development permitting process. So I don't know exactly how to approach that, if we can approach that differently.
I absolutely agree. One option that's not as good of an option, but adding an administrative permit process hopefully helps with some of these smaller projects. But I think that either 500 square feet of native vegetation we could include in the definition, or we can include an exception for invasive species. I think that's a good.
Maybe an exception for invasive species would be.
Yeah, and there's a list of invasive species, and so if those species are on that list, then there should be no limitation. I like that.
So, Trevor, just real quickly, point to where the definition is in this document.
Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, the definition of major vegetation removal.
It's page 2, Richard, in italic.
Well, so it's in the definitions. So in our working definitions, it's on page 7. And I just copied it over, but it does come up in our exclusions, I believe. And so I wanted to make sure they're consistent. So under our exclusions, so page 5 of the exemptions and exclusions.
Right.
The non-major vegetation removal is excluded.
So
does that answer your question?
Okay, what I was trying to get to is what Tristan was bringing up, that what he was trying to say is give his neighbors every opportunity to remove major vegetation. And if this is an exclusion from requiring a CDP, you're good to go, correct?
Yes. So that could be, maybe that's where we add this list of exceptions. So this list of exceptions maybe could be added to that non-major vegetation removal exclusion.
And that's where we're suggesting adding in the, invasive species, non-native vegetation, listing of those, correct?
Removal of.
And removing the 500 square foot limitation, because that's pretty easy to come up with 500 square feet on a lot of lots. And I agree, we want them to be able to yank that stuff out.
I think if it's native vegetation, the Coastal Commission is going to want some sort of limitation on square footage. But if it's non-native vegetation,
right.
maybe no limitation on square footage.
And is that a Coastal Commission definition, non-native, or where does that come from? They're going to want to have that.
Definitely, there are accepted lists of invasive. So usually most groups use the Native Plant Society, has different lists for rare species as well as invasive species. And invasive species are different from just non-native.
Right.
And there are specific lists for invasive species.
Okay. Okay. I misspoke. I was looking at exclusions, but that's for non-major vegetation removal. This gets so convoluted sometimes.
We could add another point in, though, right, of major vegetation and clearly delineate what major vegetation we are comfortable with. Does CAL FIRE, or is there, Trevor, that you've come across, or anybody else, a list of the flammable species? I'm grasping at the word right now. the high oil content, that kind of stuff that would be also, we want to encourage people to remove,
I don't know. That's a good question.
even though it might not be invasive or non-native, it still could qualify, juniper bushes, that type of stuff, just.
So Trevor, I'll give you a copy of both sides of my CAL FIRE inspection, because it has vertical spacing, horizontal spacing, and then other priorities, from windows to rain gutters to roofs, decks, fencing. Then it's got 30 to 100 feet, 30 feet, defensible and reduced fuel zones. And Aaron, I'll make you a copy so you can have it in your fire file.
Cool. On that note, Trevor, a resource might be CAL FIRE employs foresters. I don't know if you have any contacts for that in the area, but I could try, unless somebody else has a better shot at that. Might be a good resource for some of this stuff too.
Yeah, I guess in that vein, I'm reading through what you wrote, Trevor, regarding the fire severity zoning and whatnot that's put on by CAL FIRE. And of course, since we're in a municipality, we're, I guess, exempt from that basically, but CAL FIRE does provide, I think we have an agreement with CAL FIRE that they provide fire protection services to the city. So it seems like it's certainly in our best, or be a show of good faith to honor their, I guess, what they're asking for in terms of defensible space and whatnot. And as Diane mentioned, it looks like she had her property inspected by CAL FIRE. They're outside of the city limits of Trinidad. It's a state law that you have to have defensible space if you're in certain fire severity zone. And so I think there should be some wording in there to make that the development of defensible space on someone's property to be more administrative or ministerial, or I don't know if, some of that could fall under the exemption through something that's regulated by CAL FIRE, as in that, as you gave there from Humboldt County. But I guess if a homeowner wants to create more defensible space, which, doesn't necessarily mean cutting every tree down, like you said, within 150 feet, but there should be some more flexibility with that, in my opinion.
Good comments. So, Trevor, just to kind of move things along here, have we provided enough nebulous input to give you a chance to put together a more fine definition of major vegetation removal and how that would play into major versus minor and invasive species? And I think that was pretty much what we covered. Tell me if I'm missing something, but.
No, I think that, yes, gives me something to work with.
Okay. Tom, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I kind of just keep thinking about liability and the liability of say Diane doesn't like my major vegetation, and then there is a fire or something, and then how the city has worded it. I think that, like what Trevor said with the CAL FIRE, I definitely look at what they're doing. And just for a side note, I threw a torch underneath some pampas grass on my property here, and I couldn't believe how fast a redwood tree above it torched. It scared the heck out of me. We are not that far from it, not at all, from fire. I see signs of it everywhere on my property from the past. So anyway, yeah, liability and how it affects the city is something that just keeps jumping out at me.
Thank you. Let's see here. We're still working on the staff report. I'll ask the commissioners. Diane, go ahead.
So we need to, maybe Aaron and Trevor, or even myself, talk to our fire department and see what the law is for vegetation in the city. Because my little form from CAL FIRE said, be sure to contact your local fire department for additional requirements to ensure your home is compliant with the law. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Okay, very good. So we're coming up to 8 o'clock, and what's the pleasure of the commissioners? Do you want to continue? Do you want to hit any specific issues for Trevor? What's the feeling here? No comment, huh?
I think I could throw 2 cents out about scenic, what is scenic and what isn't, because that one's going to be probably something we're going to keep talking about over and over again.
Okay.
And I have just a couple thoughts on some other items too later in the document, but not a whole lot that I can throw out as well.
Okay. So let's have a brief discussion on the definition of scenic. Tom, you want to lead it off?
I guess it depends whose legal definition it is. Yeah, this one is interesting. Ocean view?
Not necessarily.
Good point.
Right? I mean, the hillsides and the forest, the groves, also scenic.
So Trevor, I think in your staff report or somewhere you listed or you mentioned that these terms of that the Coastal Commission uses are somewhat nebulous. Have you come up with any further clarification or definition that we might be able to use?
No, so I listed our general plan uses several kind of scenic vista view terminology. So I could look for some definitions of that. The only one that's specific is the Coastal Act does define highly scenic area, but that is as designated by a local jurisdiction. So that is up to the city to do. But once you do so, it's subject to these other Coastal Act regulations.
Understand, right.
So a task for next time could be to give you some definitions on scenic areas, scenic corridors, scenic vistas, and sort of give you a menu of options for those.
Okay, that might be helpful. I also would, since we're kind of just doing random thoughts here, I also thought it would be very useful. You started your staff report by some very simple definitions and relationships between exclusion, exemption, and such. And that might be useful to have as an introduction to this document, just to kind of set the stage so that, at least from my perspective, I can look at it and I kind of get in my mind which one is which, and then use that as kind of a Rosetta Stone through the whole document. Is that something that makes sense to you?
Sure, yeah, I had that in previous staff reports, I think, so I could just copy it.
Oh, okay, good. I just, maybe I
Yeah.
just forgot it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Tom?
I was amazed how effective the pages that you did with the different rows in the back with the
matrix?
exclusions, and I mean, it just reads so much clearer than trying to read paragraphs. It really jumps out at you. It's a nice graphic way of getting the point across. I decided I wanted to comment on that. Yeah, I'm thinking about trying to use that more and more, a similar system.
yeah, it was a little more work than I expected, which it's just a different way of coming at the regulations. But yeah, hopefully it gives you sort of a path to think about a specific project and how it might fit in these. Because that was my suggestion, is to sort of think about projects that have come up or might come up, and how would those projects fit within these exemptions and exclusions.
Yeah, the one question I had on the matrix was, I noticed on the pages, the rows at the top, there were an asterisk and double asterisks, and I didn't quite understand what those were.
So I think, so I used to have those as sort of a footnote at the bottom of the table, and maybe that's better. Maybe they got lost. So if you look at the very last line of the table, those are the exceptions, and that's where the stars went.
Okay.
So if you think
I see them now. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe they're easier to see if they're just a footnote under the table.
I got it. Yeah, thanks. Very good. Okay. Diane.
So, yeah, I like it. Thank you, Tom, for bringing that up. The flow charts will be really useful for Gabe and Anton and Jennifer. You know, if they have to answer a question, it's going to be a lot easier than reading, you know, an element or ordinances. So it's quick, it's spaced, it's got bullets. So Trevor, it's good. It'll be good. And I would encourage you to share that, you know, when you can in the future with Anton and Gabe, Eli, and Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, you had some comments?
Just kind of a global comment. We talk about water use in here a couple places, page 2, section H, including but limited to swimming pools, construction or extension of any landscaping irrigation system. And then again, it's also increase in water intensity or water use intensity in the matrix. I just want to make sure that as we capture that, we're only limiting metered or treated water use. So if people develop a catchment system or gray water system or something like that, there's no issue. They can go to that to their, you know, bathtub and dishwasher's delight, you know, to kind of repurpose that water. I just want to make sure we don't lose that. And then I had a question on TP 9 and 10 on page 5. I got a little confused over what isn't currently allowed with those two, and probably not currently allowed when it comes to lot line and boundary adjustments, as far as what.
So yeah, that's been one of the issues with our current ordinance is there's no exception. There's no process for exceptions from any of the standards. So there's a minimum lot size and there's no process for being 5-10 feet under that. So currently you would not be allowed to do a lot line adjustment where you create or, reduce a lot to less than the minimum lot size. That's clear. The one that's not as clear to me, I thought was clear, but as I've been looking at it more, there's definitely for uses and structures, you cannot increase the existing degree of nonconformity. That's very specific. So, if you have a structure that doesn't meet setbacks, for example, you can't add on to it and in the area that doesn't meet setbacks, for example. But when you look at non-conforming lots, it doesn't actually include that provision, that same provision. So now I'm less clear on it. So it's kind of silent. And I talked about it last month. I had someone inquire to me about correcting a property line to a fence line, but their lot was already less than 8,000 square feet and it would have made their lot even smaller. And I said, well, no, you can't do that because you can't increase the degree of nonconformity. But now I think that could be argued either way.
Okay.
So I think the ordinance is unclear currently.
Something else for the to-do list. Got it. And then one more on page 1. I think it's page 1. Yes. A4 OWTS improvements, repairs, and upgrades. So that falls under the administrative coastal development permits. Are you with me?
Yes.
So I guess a clarifying question on that. So in theory, could an upgrade to a OWTS system that increases functional capacity be approved administratively? The way this is written?
I think no. And I think I need to define these things. I just got comments back from the Coastal Commission on our ADU ordinance today. And I was going to report on it as part of the staff report. I've only had a chance to quickly go through them. I think there's not too much. Most of the comments have to do with how that ordinance is going to interact with other pieces of the zoning ordinance, and the OWTS was a big part of the comments. And what can be approved ministerially, and what can be, what requires a coastal development permit. So I think we do need to define that, because I would say no, if you're increasing functional capacity, that's a coastal development permit. But I would also consider an upgrade, is converting from a pit to a leach field, an upgrade, an improvement,
right.
What is that? So yes, I think we need to define, I need to work on definitions for that.
Okay, yeah, because the increasing the functional capacity of, a 3-bedroom system to a 4-bedroom system, obviously I don't think would be an administrative permit, right?
That's right.
Okay, so just clarifying that. Okay, cool. That was all. Thanks.
Any other general comments on the document? Well, I think we're reaching the point of diminishing returns. So I guess I would propose that rather than go through the document as we did the first one, kind of line by line, hopefully we've given you some information, Trevor, that we can polish it again. And we probably should take this up at our next meeting so that we can kind of get the final comments to you and finish it off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're getting to a point where I can probably pull out a few key issues or questions that I would like some final input on, and then it's probably to a point where we can get it to Coastal Commission staff for review and comment.
Okay, that sounds fair. Very good. Okay, at this point, I'll open it up for public comment on the draft CDP. Excuse me, let me go back here to my draft CDP exemption, exclusions, and administrative permits agenda. Any public comment? Paula?
I have a comment, excuse me, about what just passed as far as fire protection around property. I believe it was Tom that said that it was a state law that you had to have a fire defensible space around your property that didn't apply to municipalities. And I'm wondering about the liability. Having read in a number of engineering reports that this area, due to drought, continuing drought, has an increasing probability of having a sizable fire. And if there was a fire, there's also the problem of how many gallons does it take, average-wise, to put out a fire, because we may be, over the next few years, limited in the amount of capacity that Trinidad has in storage as far as water. So if there was a fire, I was wondering if you could get information from a fire department. How many gallons does it take? I don't know if you could average a house fire. What if a house fire turns into 2 houses? There's that question, the availability of water, and also the question of liability. If we don't have to, if Trinidad doesn't have to follow state law, I'm not 100% clear about that, but if that's true, and there's not a fire defensible space around a property, and there is a fire that spreads, adding the fact that we might not have enough water to dampen it, that could be a serious issue. So there's 2 questions. One, can someone approach the fire department and find out the specifics of generally speaking, what's required, and also the specifics of the law? Is it true that Trinidad, 100% true that Trinidad doesn't have to follow the law, that we have to outside of city limits? And if it doesn't, then and Trinidad is responsible for creating an ordinance to protect the town, I suppose.
So those are good questions. We do have some information in the water reports that GHD produced in 2019. We have some information on standard requirements for fire flows and how the city compares. The city has not adopted its own sort of fire flow requirements, but the city's storage capacity does meet the requirements for fire flows. I forget which of GHD's water reports that's in, but that is in one of the 2019 reports. In terms of state defensibility requirements, I can look more into that, but it's not that Trinidad doesn't have to follow the state law. It's that the law applies in areas that have been mapped as high, moderate, or high severity by CAL FIRE, and they haven't mapped the city. So the city hasn't been mapped. And so I don't know what that means in terms of the city's obligations or liability. That's a good question.
Yeah, and I would also suggest that we tie in the Water Advisory Committee into this, as that's part of their charter, is to deal with these kinds of issues. Thank you very much for those comments, Paula.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, which is commissioner reports. Any commissioners have anything that they would like to report out? Diane.
We had an applicant apply for the STR committee. So a local resident. So the city council will take that up. And then Trevor suggested that I bring this up. I gave everybody an article that I ran off, and it's just got some good things in it that as we do all this vegetation maintenance and removal, we can look at, what a lawyer's done in the past. And Trevor suggested that we just read it and then we could bring it up, at one of our meetings. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Any other commissioner reports? And let's see, where you jumped to. Oh, there you are, Cheryl. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want me to chime in here or so let me know if this is appropriate, but we did have the trail committee meeting this week. And I wanted to give the planning commission a heads up that we're working on a trail signage inventory and some recommendations. We have a draft that I'll send to you that you can review now, and then maybe that becomes a future agenda item once that's vetted with the trail committee. And we're also working on a trail map and hoping to leverage the maps that the new trail maps that I think are being created as part of the general plan. I believe the rec element, but I'm not 100% sure. Trevor will know. And then the other item I have is for future agenda items. Oh, and thank you for nominating someone for WAC. So, and I've captured what Paula suggested around firefighting as well. But anyway, I'll save my other one for future agenda topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But yeah, Cheryl, I do have a current and I think pretty accurate map of Trinidad trails. But for the general plan, we stripped it down to just trails and vista points with no names and no improvements, because that's what's going to be. The Coastal Commission suggested that for that map, less might be more for the general plan in terms of what's certified for the map. But for the trails policy, I wanted to create a more detailed map that sort of color-coded trails by name and included some of the benches and sign markers, because markers were discussed as a safety issue. If someone fell on a trail, they could call and say, I'm by marker 21 or something. So that's in the trails policy, and I would love to get some input on, so you could take that base general plan trails map and see what you want to add to it. So I'll get you a copy of that.
Okay, we'll have a look at that. And then thank you for mentioning the trail policy, because we've teed that up for, I believe, the next trail committee meeting, which I don't know when it's going to be yet. It should be 2 or 3 months, though, probably. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for being our liaison. Okay. Any other reports? A staff report, I'm sorry. Trevor?
I think I was able to report at the last meeting that we got our LCP grant. I submitted a work plan for that. I think the OPC grant that includes the sea level rise planning is finally moving forward. I'll be working on an SHN scope of work for that. So that's really good news for the general plan update. And then I already mentioned the ADU ordinance, and I still have a couple of pending applications, but nothing I'm expecting real quick. So I have been working on general plan figures, and I've been working on the circulation element. Looking back, the Planning Commission did not actually recommend that one yet to the City Council. So I'm working on some more revisions and the figures, and I hope to bring that back to you, if not next month, the month after. Making good progress on the figures, which has been kind of a hurdle. And then the ADU ordinance I should be bringing back to you as well. So plenty on our plate.
Do you want to mention anything about the climate action plan?
Oh yeah. Oh, and then yes. So the regional climate action plan, I sent out an email this afternoon. It's a public review draft is available. We're going to be asking one of the folks that's been organizing that to attend the next city council meeting to provide a presentation. I'm not sure if they can do both the planning commission and city council, but I can provide an update to the planning commission. So it's a big and complex document. It's a lot to digest. And it has been, I haven't been involved, this started actually under Dan Berman. I mean, it started many years ago, and I haven't been consistently involved, but I have been fairly involved lately. And then Jennifer is getting involved, but it's kind of one of those things. Trinidad's participating, but what Trinidad can do is somewhat limited because we can't do the high density mixed use transit oriented development that reduces greenhouse gases. So, but maybe we can do more electrification of buildings, electric vehicles, charging stations, bike share programs, transit passes. So those kind of things are the kind of things that Trinidad committed to. The main advantage of having this, so this one's so complex because it's quantified, it's not just a qualified document. And so it has significant advantages for CEQA, so the environmental review process under CEQA. So projects get to be streamlined, but we do so few CEQA projects in Trinidad. It doesn't have huge benefits for Trinidad. And then if Trinidad doesn't make its commitment, it doesn't have huge consequences for other jurisdictions. So we're kind of tagging along for the ride, but I think it's a good document for people to be aware of and review and ask questions and provide input.
Yeah, I'm on an ad hoc committee for RCEA for review. So my plate's full for the next 45 days. Okay, last item is future agenda items, and the list keeps getting longer and longer. Tom?
As a planning commission, should we be, I'm seeing things about the offshore wind. Should we be, is that anything that's going to involve us?
Good question. I think, I really don't know. I mean, yes, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to participate in any sort of review. And I think our comments would be certainly useful, certainly related to any of the fisheries issues. But at this point, I'm not certain, but that's something that we should maybe consider. Sure.
I just wanted to, I know you guys have a long list of future topics, but I'll just add this to the list and it can be part of the prioritization. But we had talked about rainwater catchment systems and having some blueprints for kind of pre-approved plans. And now that the Water Advisory Committee is reconvening, it would be great to revisit that. And I wasn't sure if you wanted to keep the tsunami siren on your list. Because there is an automated system now for through phones and so forth. And I could be wrong, but I think that may replace the need for the tsunami siren. So I added one, but I tried to take one away.
No, I was going to make the same comment. We had a brief discussion about this related to the performance of the sirens versus the maintenance, and the fact that several of them are completely kaput, including the one at Trinidad. And I think to be perfectly honest, at this point, I think we're going to find out that the only thing the planning commission has to do is approve removal.
Okay,
No one is going to fix it.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen.
yeah.
And no one's going to put in I think it was $750,000 to buy new ones. So
Oh, my goodness. Okay,
I just, yeah, I mean, we can leave it on there, but I think it's more of a placeholder than anything at this point.
I see.
Personal opinion, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. We're just absolutely getting slammed with rain. Are you
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah.
Speaking, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
So should I take tsunami siren update off the list for now?
I would.
Well, Tom, are there any, on your disaster committee, did they talk about the siren?
No, from what I heard, that the cell phone did work better
Okay,
than any of the sirens. The sirens are just out in the weather and they're just not holding up, is what I heard. And the disaster stuff, though, this month was limited. There was some, but it's supposedly going to be kicking up next month.
okay, well, keep us informed. Thank you for
Definitely.
doing that. And then I had one thing for Cheryl. Anton and I talked about those rain catchment systems, and I don't know, if we can get Becky to do some kind of a grant to help residents do that. I think it's really important, and I wouldn't mind, purchasing one, because all the garbage cans that I want to save the rain in have holes in the bottom. So
Okay.
So
anyway, let's just see what, let's keep that going, because I'm
Yeah.
definitely on that
So-
page.
So Becky is, I have chatted with Becky a couple times, and she is on the hunt for, we don't have anything yet identified, but she is on the hunt for a grant for that.
Okay,
it sounds like there was one originally proposed as part of the city's stormwater grant, I think, at the museum or the library area. And they're gonna try and add that, see if they can add that back in.
Yeah,
And then,
so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
so they're gonna see if they can add that back in as part of the grant, because it was taken out at some point. So they're gonna see if they can add that back in, because there's still budget available. I was gonna say, in terms of the tsunami, so I guess for visitors, then there needs to be a system for the sheriffs or some sort of emergency responders to actually go down to beaches and warn visitors who don't get the local emergency texts. And so, that might be something that, Tom, if with your disaster committee, the city does have an emergency response plan, and it should be updated to reflect the fact that there's not a tsunami siren. And so it's really up to the sheriffs to go down to the beaches and warn people, or someone, whoever is responsible for that.
Along those same lines, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, no, I just was going to say, yes, it's on the list. That's a very good recommendation. We will be talking about that, and I'll give you an update on it.
Great.
And don't forget about me when I'm out my kayak fishing and don't have a cell phone with me. And
Yeah.
folks like surfing,
You
That
can
was
just
one of
ride the
gaps.
wave out.
That was one of the gaps that they were trying to figure out. Yeah. Okay, any last minute comments? Tristan, I want to thank you for joining us. I hope we haven't scared you off tonight, but appreciate you participating, as well as everyone else. Thanks a lot. We did a lot of good work tonight, and I believe we are adjourned. Thank you all.
thank you.
night.
Good night.
Bye.